When I do these retro reviews, I often talk about whether or not the game is held up. And well, in the case of Crazy Taxi, I can tell you right now, this game is right up there with Super Mario Brothers and the original Legend of Zelda, as in, it is held up wonderfully. This is the type of game that took such a simple concept and ran wild with it. Crazy Taxi is the absolute perfect example to show why Sega was such a groundbreaking arcade maker. They were able to take such an extremely and ridiculously simple idea, in this case driving, and just, like I said, run wild with it. This is why there are legions of fans for the House of the Dead series, and why every single Dreamcast owner should own a copy of Crazy Taxi. This game was not only one of the smash hits that helped define the Dreamcast itself, but Sega as a whole. So here's the concept. You drive around an open city picking up fares. Once you have them, you basically have to get them to their destination as quickly as possible. That's it. That's all. Sounds simple, doesn't it? And well, yeah, it kind of is. It's also some of the most fun you can possibly have with a modern video game. Oh, screw that, with any video game. There's no story, there's no long, open-ended adventure. No, this is just pure arcade fun. You see, the catch is that you can get your fares to their destination any way you want. Be it driving underwater, through incoming traffic, you name it, you can do it. In fact, the more daring you are, and the quicker you get your clients to their desired location, the more money you earn, and the greater your time bonus is. Like I said, guys, this is arcade fun at its absolute best. Not only do you have your standard arcade-style gameplay mode, which forces you to constantly pick up new fares in order to keep time on your clock, but there are 3, 5, and 10-minute alternatives which offer a little bit more of a relaxed experience. One of my personal favorite additions to the home version is the addition of the Dreamcast City. It's an entirely new city added for players to experience on top of the arcade city, which basically, if you were going to the arcades at this point in time, which would have been around 1999 if my memory serves me correctly, this really was something to see, because it was like, wow, not only do I get the arcade perfect version, but I also get this whole new Dreamcast city. So it offered them something entirely new. But for players who had never experienced Crazy Taxi before, well, think of this sort of like a hard mode or a more advanced city. There's also something called the Crazy Box mode, which I like to tell players to start with, because it essentially is a mission-based objective mode, sort of, where it basically tells you, like, do this or do that, and acts as basically a glorified tutorial, and it's extremely useful. Now, while the game does feature, a relatively simple concept, mastering it will require dozens upon dozens of hours. You can perform a crazy dash, a crazy drift, a backdash, backdrift, a stop, and much, much more. And this is all done through the simple manipulation of the gas, brake, drive, and reverse gear. And it still blows my mind at just how complex you can get with Crazy Taxi if you invest enough time with it. A lot of people used to compare it to basically a really good fighting game, in the sense that, anyone can pick it up and play, but only a few will be able to truly master it. Outside of the gameplay, the graphics hold up surprisingly well. Sure, it might be a little boxy here and there for some of, the picky gamers of today, but I find it holds up relatively well. I must admit that the Dreamcast city, the original one, the new city if you will, doesn't look quite as detailed or refined as the arcade city, and there is a lot more pop-up in that version. In terms of overall frame rate, I'd say 90% of the game runs at 60 frames per second, and then the rest there is a little bit of slowdown here and there, but it's really nothing to go on about. The soundtrack features the Offspring and Bad Religion. And for whatever reason, the alternative rock edge sort of fits this, like the tone of the game, perfectly. Now, while the soundtrack rocks, the same can't really be said for the voice acting. Sure, it was a little bit impressive back in the day, but most of the pedestrians say the same few lines over and over again. The same is true for the driver. And, you know, it does get old a little bit fast, but thankfully the music is blaring so loudly that you really won't be paying any attention to what people say. And one of the only, real problems with the original Crazy Taxi on the Dreamcast was with the on-screen directional arrow. And that basically is supposed to be telling you where you have to go. Now, here's the issue. In the arcade city, it actually gives you sort of like a turn-by-turn GPS. And that works great, because it allows you to know, okay, well, I gotta, the turn's coming up, I'm gonna turn here, blah, blah, blah. But in the Dreamcast city, it's just fixated on where your overall objective is. In other words, where that destination is. And that takes a little bit of time to adjust between the two gameplay modes. But that's pretty much all the negative stuff I've got to say about the game. Sega might not be dead, guys, but to be honest, they're no longer the same company, or at least not in my eyes. Most of the greatest developers have long since left Sega. But I like to come back to this game. I like to come back to Crazy Taxi because it shows Sega at their absolute best. They took such a ridiculously simple concept and created something so addictive and fun that some 13 years after its release, you can still lose yourself in it. Now, I consider that a true gaming classic. And while there have been countless ports to other platforms, the Dreamcast was Crazy Taxi's original home. And if you own a Dreamcast, you really need to play this game. Sure, it might sound simple and repetitive, but I'm telling you all right now, this one will shock you by just how much fun it really is. For the full written review, hit up projectcoe.com.
Serious speed! Nothing I can't handle.